Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Michael, and I'm exploring all the different ways that stationery can bring me joy. I'm really excited for today's video because I'm going to be exploring the different ways to swatch ink to try and figure out which one I like the best. As someone who is kind of new to the depths of the stationery community and the fountain pen and fountain pen ink hobby, I have slowly been accruing different full-size bottle of inks and now dipping my toes in samples, and I kind of want to figure out what's the way that I like swatching ink the best. And so I thought I would bring you along for the ride and kind of like a fountain pen ink swatching 101 and test out the different ways that you can swatch an ink to see how they look. Later on in this video, I'm going to also be doing a comparison of different paper and how the paper reacts to fountain pen ink to kind of figure out which paper I like the best or would like to use for different situations or scenarios. I will get to that in the second part of this video. But to start us off, we are talking swatching style. To swatch the ink, I'm going to be using Midori's empty paper. My ink notebook, which I have featured on this channel a few times now, is a Midori MD paper notebook. And in here I do my full bottle swatches. I keep an account of my different pens and what inks are in those pens. And as I mentioned, I'm getting into ink samples, and so I now have a sample section where I'm swatching those as well. But I want to figure out what best swatching method works for me. So we're going to be testing out 5 different ways to swatch the ink. I am using MD paper, as I mentioned, because it does match my ink notebook. This is a pad of MD paper. It's A5 size. You just kind of pull up one sheet at a time. And I've taken those sheets and I use my paper slicer to cut them in half so that I have little half sheets to practice these swatches on. I am going to take one of the full sheets to kind of use as a background in case there's some bleeding, and do one sheet at a time as we go through. And so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to swatch the ink. I'm then going to use my Sailor Hocoro dip pen to write the ink title just so we can see how the writing looks underneath. And although that should be the same for every swatch because it is the same paper. So maybe I won't end up writing the name. We'll see. The 5 methods that I have here to swatch the ink are the first one that I used, which was the tried and true Q-tip. I'm going to dip, swirl around. Next, I'm going to be using a paintbrush. This is a Princeton Art and Brush Company paintbrush. Number 3, a round brush. I'm going to be using that. I recently purchased this glass muddler. Going to use that. Although the last video that I used this, I had a very helpful member of the community, I think it was Planner Coven, comment that I need to just put a drop of the ink and use the muddler to swirl it around instead of dipping the entire muddler into the ink, because that was a very saturated sample. And so she pointed me in the direction of Dandelion Diaries, who I will link here and also put in the description, who uses droppers to kind of drop one drop of ink and use the muddler to swirl it around. And so I went out and purchased some droppers to add to my kit of fountain pen ink accoutrement. I'm also going to try out a plastic spoon. That was mentioned to me. Put the ink and spread it around with the spoon. And last but not least, I have my Sailor Hocoro dip pen, and I got a stub nib, the stub nib attachment, and I can dip and just kind of try and create a swatch with that. I'm interested to see how easy that is. So these are the 5 methods that I'm going to attempt today. The ink that I'm going to be using is the Pilot Iroshiziku Yama-budo ink. I chose this ink because it has really interesting shading and sheening properties that I would like to see of the 5 styles, where it comes out the most, how it comes out in the sample, in the swatch. So that is what I'll be using today for that. The first one we're doing is Q-tip. So I'm going to open up the bottle. I'm going to actually try it here. Dip. And getting in here. And so this is the thing I don't like about the Q-tip, is that because the Q-tip itself soaks up the ink, it's, I think, wasting a lot of the ink just being soaked into the Q-tip. And so I'm gonna try just a little more. All right, a little bit of movie magic here. I've taken my Hocoro dip pen and written Q-tip. My camera suddenly stopped recording, but I am going to be labeling each sample. So in looking at this swatch, you can definitely see some of the lines from where I had to put a lot of pressure and like push the cotton to kind of like absorb into the paper. The shading is definitely there, and the sheening is coming out a little bit as it finishes drying. We'll come back and look and see how that does. But that is using the Q-tip to make an ink swatch. So now we're going to move into our next method, which is the paintbrush. So with this, I'm just going to dip it directly into the ink and create the swatch. Oh wow, so already I can feel how much better the ink just kind of sliding onto the paper is with the paintbrush. It is creating a much more of a swatch-like experience. Or I guess like what I would feel a swatch should look like. Looking more painterly, I guess you would say. Kind of trying to create some of those more saturated dots. Some heavier, more saturated areas. All right. And that is using the paintbrush. Can pull it up. So you can definitely see that the shading is coming out already in here. We'll see how the sheen ends up looking. I can kind of see it already forming in some areas. A much smoother experience. I'm not having to put as much pressure. I think next time I could be a little less hesitant and just really like saturate the brush to get, so I can do it in a more smooth 1 to 2 movements. But yeah, if I had to compare so far, definitely liking this experience more than the Q-tip. But let's get that over here to dry and move on to our third method. So in our third method, we are going to be using the muddler. Again, this is made of glass, and I'm going to redeem myself and not dip the muddler completely in the ink, but use the dropper to get maybe 2 drops of ink, and then I will use the muddler to swirl it around. So 1 drop, 2 drops. Oh wow, yeah. This is so fun. I feel like I'm a kid finger painting again. I'm trying very hard to not put a super amount of pressure on the paper, as I don't want it to kind of create the lines like with the Q-tip. And I'm trying to just spread this around as much as I can to leave some lighter and some heavier, more saturated areas. Interesting. Yeah, wow, that's such a different experience from both the Q-tip and the paintbrush, mostly because the muddler isn't absorbing any of the ink, so you're just kind of pushing it around. I do realize that this swatch is a little smaller than the others, and so maybe 3 drops of ink would have been more appropriate. But you can already see that the shading is coming out in areas. The sheen, not so much. Maybe here a little bit. Wow, I'm not holding the center at all. Maybe here a little bit. It's coming out. Yama-budo does have kind of like a golden sheen, and it's starting to form a little, but I'm excited to see when this dries fully what it looks like. But that is the muddler. And let's move on to our next one. So what I'm assuming is going to be very similar to the muddler. And our most cost-effective method, perhaps behind the Q-tip, is the plastic spoon. And so like the muddler, 2 drops of ink, and I'm just going to use the spoon to push the ink around. So I'm just going to get my dropper. 1. 2. All right, here we go. Wow, interesting. Much like the muddler, you're just pushing the ink around, but you're also have more control. It just kind of spreads evenly because there's more surface area. That's why I got this almost circular swatch. I mean, I'm sure I could zigzag a little and make it a little more of an interesting shape, but it was interesting. The paper kind of was like almost undulating as I swirled it around. Just gonna label this that this is our plastic spoon. Definitely some more saturated areas there. If I'd wanted to keep pushing the sample or the drops out with the spoon, eventually thinning it out, it wouldn't have had them, but I do want to see how the different thin and thicker layers of the ink look as it dries. Definitely the shading is coming out. The sheen is starting to form as it dries. I'm very interested to see what this looks like as it fully dries. And last but not least, we're going to try and use this wider stub nib to create a swatch. Now, I don't think that this makes a lot of sense for a swatch as big as I'm making, but we'll try. Yeah, I had a feeling this would not work very well. So this might actually be really good for doing samples, but it's not going to create a big swatch. Like the other methods. Unless perhaps, let's experiment. Yeah, interesting. Now I know that this is a pretty small stub nib. It's a 1.0. And I think they make larger ones. I don't know how large the Sailor Hocoro dip pen goes, but this is what the stub nib is looking like so far. Interested to see what it looks like when it dries. This might be a good thing for like when I'm doing samples of ink and I'm doing the small swatches. Yeah, we will come back to that as it dries. All right, our ink is mostly dry and we're ready to do some comparisons. So we have here our Q-tip swatch, and as it's dried, you can definitely see the lines from where I was pushing hard with the Q-tip do show through still. The shading is looking pretty great. You can see the sheen. I don't know if that's coming out on camera. A little bit around these heavier spots. With a little bit of a golden hue there. Comparing that with the paintbrush. The paintbrush definitely doesn't have any of those lines. It has a much more swatch feeling, like swish kind of look. I think, as I mentioned, if I was just more confident in really filling up the brush, I could do this in like 2 swipes as opposed to the couple it took. The shading, definitely there. The sheen is coming out here in this area and around this darker area as well. You can see it. It's more prominent than the Q-tip, but it's still not drastic. I'm not sure if the camera picks that up or not as I tilt it into the different light sources, but it is there. Interestingly enough, we have our muddler, and now this is really interesting. Really even saturation. The shading is there, but the sheen on this is wild. And so it's definitely bringing out the golden sheen and the properties of that ink much stronger than the paintbrush or the Q-tip. And I really hope that the camera can capture that. I'm trying to tilt so that as it's going to the different light sources, perhaps it pops out. But you can see it like here in the center. It's kind of almost all over the sample, definitely a halo around the edge. Versus our plastic spoon, which also does a really great job of capturing the shading and the sheen. I think the muddler is the most prominent, but you can see that golden sheen kind of here and in a ring a little bit as it has dried, and a little strong right up here as well too. And so that is there. The stub nib, don't know what my thought process was here, and as to that would be a good idea. I think you have to put so much pressure to get a lot of the ink out that I've ended up just kind of drawing a lot of lines. The property does kind of come out, the sheen you can see here on the edge, but not great. Maybe for like a small sample, or if I just wanted to like, you know, do a quick like diagonal lines across hatch and writing the name, I would use that, but definitely not for ink swatching. So this was a big did not work out for me. If you are new to the fountain pen world, this was not a vibe for swatching. But I do think that maybe if I want to make those cross hatches to see what the ink looks like as it's written, this would be really great. And in the next part of this video, when I am testing different paper, perhaps this will be very useful to do that. But I do think that overall, my favorite to do was kind of the paintbrush. I think it's looking the best with the muddler. However, The plastic spoon and the muddler are very similar. I think the muddler has captured it a little bit more, but that also could be because I kept it a little more tight, the ink sample, that I didn't put the swatch as a big of a circle. But surprisingly, just bust out your plastic cutlery and you've got a great swatching mechanism. But I do really enjoy this muddler method. And so I think when swatching in my notebooks, I'm going to continue moving in my notebook, I'm going to continue using the muddler for my full bottles. And I do have a stamp that from Yoseka that you stamp and you put the ink sample. And I think the paintbrush would actually work really well for that. It has also brought out the qualities of the ink that I think are really, really important. And I think in a smaller area that I need to, really control, the paintbrush works really well for that. So out of the 4, or 5, if you include this disastrous attempt, I think paintbrush and muddler are my favorites. I would love to know, like, how do you swatch your ink? If you are a person who has some ink and you've swatched them for whatever reason, do you use swatch cards? Do you have a swatch notebook? Do you use a different method? I'd love a suggestion so that I can try another method out. I know that there are many different ways to swatch ink, and I've only tried 5 here, 4 ones that I think worked really well. One that was, I don't know what I was thinking. But you know what? That's the joy of this hobby. Getting messy, try things out, see if it works or not. But yeah, definitely the muddler and the paintbrush have worked out for me as my favorite. So let me know in the comments what you do. And out of these 4, which you liked the most, or 5. I mean, maybe someone really likes this if they are dark and scary. And so we're going to move over to Future Michael, who's going to be kind of looking at the different types of paper and how they take ink. Welcome back. We're moving into our second part of this inky adventure by testing out different papers and how fountain pen ink reacts to them or works with them, and kind of this fountain pen ink 101. I'm very excited because in this part we're going to be working with a new ink that I got for my birthday. Woo! I am a July baby, 1 day into Leo, and my birthday is coming up this week, and to celebrate I had to get myself something a little stationery related, and so bum-ba-da-bum, I got another Sailor Shikiori ink. I figured a smaller bottle would be better, and I got this in the Yonaga color because I actually don't have a blue ink in my collection, really. I have some blue blacks, I have purple, but not blue, and so I am excited to work with this ink. And at the store, when I picked it up at Goods for the Study on the Upper West Side, they were like, a lot of the people behind the counter thought that this was a great blue. There was another one that they were kind of also pointing me towards, but it was a little bit lighter. It had more shading qualities. And I have a lot of inks that do that. And since I like to write with extra fine pens most of the time, the shading doesn't really come out in those as much. And so I figured this would be a strong everyday blue. So I'm gonna end the video with logging this new bottled ink in my ink log. So it's gonna go right here after this Diatramentus archive ink that was so thick and gloppily put on because I did not understand how to use that muddler just yet, but it did not bleed through. So MD paper already doing a great job. Spoiler. So let me just move this bookmark here to remind myself that we need to come back to that spot. But for the purposes of this test, I'm using little slivers of paper, of different types of paper, 2 inches by 1.5 inch. And I'm inspired by my stationery kind of journal in here. In my Travelers, I've kind of showed this off before, but recently I Did a comparison of the Pilot Iroshiziku ink in the Fuyu Syogun and in the Kirisame. And then I bought Afternoon Tea. And I swatched them on paper using the stamp from Yoseka, and then I kind of tipped them into my stationery journal. And I like this idea, and so these swatches are eventually going to go in a double spread here, and I'll have a record of how the inks acted on all these different papers here. I won't be using the stamp for this just because I want to see the ink itself and how it reacts to the paper and not have the stamp there as well. So I'm just going to use the muddler. I'm going to do 1 drop of ink and do a small circle. I'm going to use my stub nib in the Hocoro dip pen to do some hashing. And then I'll use my medium nib dip pen to just write the name, the Shikiori Yonaga on each swatch. So I'm going to introduce each paper. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, and then we will jump into swatching. And then at the end, like last time, I will show all of the swatches as they've dried. So to start us off, we are going to be swatching on, I do think that I should continue using this MD paper as a backing. And I won't be swatching on MD paper for this video because my ink notebook is MD paper, so I'll see how the ink reacts there. So our first one is a Rhodia notebook. I've taken the paper out and cut it to the size that I want. And so we're going to see how ink reacts to Rhodia paper. Rhodia is 80 GSM. It is a company that is in France. They were founded in 1932. However, in 1997, Clairefontaine, another paper company, bought the company out. But they've kept Rhodia as a subsidiary under their larger umbrella. And so I'm excited to see how ink reacts here. So I'm going to open up this bottle. Happy birthday to me. Oh my God, that looks really beautiful. And let me get a new dropper. And away we go. So 1 drop. Wow. Okay, there we go. And let's get this muddler in there. All right. That is still kind of a thick application. I'm wondering if in the next one I should spread it out a little more. But I think it's also good to see how it's reacting on here. Now, this paper feels pretty thick and waxy on the outside, so I feel like it's going to handle this fairly decently. I think I need some more experience using a stub nib there. All right, let's see, first impressions. The paper is warping a little bit. Looking under, it doesn't seem to be bleeding through. Wrote pretty smooth on there. almost like too smoothly though when I was writing with the medium nib. There is our Rhodia paper. Yeah, I do think that I need to just spread that ink out a little more next time. So I'm going to set this aside to dry, and we'll try the next one. So our next paper comes from a Moleskine notebook. Moleskine? I think it's Moleskine. Correct me if I am incorrect. This paper is 70 GSM. Moleskine is a company that was founded in Milan in 1997, so we got some Italian paper going on here. And I have heard that Moleskine does not take fountain pen ink very well. However, it depends on the notebook. I've heard from other people that certain notebooks do actually take it well. There's a whole system of like looking at the tag. I saved it from this pack. This was a set of 3 plain journals. Something like if it has the dots on the band, and then something about the mix of paper where it comes from. Is it supporting responsible forestry, or does it say something else? And then also where it's made tells you something, like if it's where it was manufactured. Like this one's from Ecuador. I know some are Vietnam or other countries. I don't know the secret. I think that is a formula that other people have figured out, and I'm not exactly sure which one is which. So we'll see if this one takes this fountain pen ink well or not. And let's jump in. So we're gonna do 1 drop on this Moleskine paper. I will say it does feel thinner. The Rhodia was 80 GSM, this is 70. It does feel a little thinner, not as a waxy. I'm trying to avoid rubbing my fingers where I'm about to put the ink, but doesn't feel as waxy. So I'm gonna do my little drop, and let's try and spread this out even more. Oh yeah, this is soaking in immediately. Oh, it's already completely soaked through. I am guessing that this is not gonna go well. Oh, the feathering. I don't know if you can see that. Oh, and it has definitely bled through. The feathering on that is not great. It didn't bleed through in the swatch completely. There's just like speckles, but it definitely bled through in the hatching, cross hatch that I created. Wow. Already not a vibe. I'm a little afraid to put this down. I'm gonna put it on the towel over here to dry. So that Moleskine paper, 70 GSM, did not pass the vibe check. I'm gonna use this Q-tip to spread this ink, kind of use it as a blotter so that it won't mess up the next sample. Wow. So you can kind of see the difference here already. Rhodia paper, Moleskine. Fascinating. All right. Next up is Iroful paper. So I have this packet of A5 Iroful paper that I recently got. I cut out a sample. So the Iroful paper is 75 GSM. They're also a Japanese paper company. They were founded in 2016, and the company that owns Iroful is called Sakai Technical Paper. Also feels a little thin, but there is more of a coating feeling than the Moleskine paper. It feels like there is a barrier here. Not as waxy feeling as the Rhodia paper, but there is a feeling of it. It feels sturdier, even though it is also kind of thin. So here we go. Our Iroful paper. Oh, something I forgot to do, backtrack, forgive me, is I wanted to also write the type of paper. So this is Rhodia. And let me grab this. Moleskine. So Iroful. Going to put my drop. I'm actually trying to do not even a full drop. Grab my muddler. All right. So interesting, because the feeling of the paper is definitely how the ink is acting. So not as waxy as the Rhodia, so it is soaking in a little bit more, but not as untreated feeling as the Moleskine. So the ink is drying and soaking in some places and pooling in others. And even this dot, there's a little bit of like a feathering action around the edge, but definitely not bleeding through. Oh no, I wrote the word sailor. Shikiori. And I'm just gonna write Iroful, even though I should write the color. So I'm gonna let that dry and we can come look back at how it's performed. But as far as I can tell, no bleed through on this Iroful paper. Next up, we have Tomoe River paper, Sanzen, from a Hobonichi notebook. Hobonichi uses Tomoe River paper, the Tomoe River Sanzen, and I know there's a lot of controversy about switching from the original Tomoe River paper to this Tomoe River Sanzen, and there's been spotty consistency as far as fountain pens in this paper. So let's see how this performs on this Tomoe River Sanzen. Tomoe River Sanzen paper is 52 GSM, so it feels very thin. Although there is a little bit of a coating feeling to it, it is the thinnest feeling of all the papers. And Tomoe River was acquired by the Sanson Corporation in 2021. They are a Japanese company, but I am excited to see how this ink performs. So we're going to come in with that sort of one drop and bring in the muddler. Yeah, see, not even, it really soaked in. Couldn't even get some dots out of there. This felt closest to the Moleskine paper in the way that the ink reacted. Oh, and I definitely had some bleed through. Oh yeah, and you can definitely see it on the other side. We'll do a look at ghosting on the papers as we move forward. Oh yeah. Well, it looks lovely on the paper, and the writing experience was very smooth. I can tell that it is bleeding through. We'll come back when it's dry to be able to flip it over and really compare. But it's gonna have to go on the towel with that Moleskine paper, which is not a good sign. I'm just gonna blot any of this with this Q-tip to make sure it's not wet. Next up, we have 2 more to go for a total of 6. This is the CD notebook. This is made by the company Amica. It's another Japanese paper company founded in 1916. These look very similar to like those Life notebooks. They have a very similar aesthetic, this like almost like banker looking notebook. These are supposed to be very fountain pen friendly. It's an 81.4 GSM in the CD15 notebook. I actually got this on clearance and got to add it into this roundup last minute. I've never worked in an Amica CD notebook, but I have my sample here. Fortunately, it's lined because I did get it out of the clearance area, so didn't have a choice of blank or grid. But I'm excited to see how the paper reacts to the ink, or rather how the ink reacts to the paper. I don't know. So we're gonna go in here. Oh, let me just talk about the feeling here. Definitely thicker. I mean, obviously that 81.4 GSM and a coating feeling. Not as strong as the Rhodia. I'd say more akin to the Iroful paper. Maybe even a little less than that, but maybe on par. Let's get our dot of ink and bring in the muddler. Yeah, I said that it had a feeling akin to the Iroful, and it's definitely reacted to the ink like the Iroful. Didn't soak in right away. I was allowed to, had a lot of fun spreading it around, but it's definitely kind of getting in there. Doesn't feel like there's any bleed through. Let's try some of this. Oops, not straight, but that's okay. And this was a CD15. is holding up pretty well. Honestly, even a little better than the Iroful, I think. But we'll see. When it fully dries, we'll be able to flip them over, see the backs, see if there's any ghosting or bleeding. And last but not least, in talking to people at Goods for the study, they also recommended, as great fountain pen notebook, this brand, the Yu-sari notebook. This is also a Japanese product. It is made by the Nakabayashi Corporation, founded in 1927. They had on their website the catchphrase or their slogan, "Founded for fountain pen lovers," or "Crafted for fountain pen lovers." This was also on clearance when I nabbed it, and so didn't mind getting it as thick, especially because I do love grid paper, so I could use this for letters and whatnot. And this is 95 GSM, so I think out of all of the papers, the highest GSM, and you can definitely feel it. It feels a lot heftier. And there is kind of like that feeling of a coating. It's the closest to the Rhodia I think we've come, but not quite there. Yeah, the Rhodia almost feels like there's plastic on it to my fingertips. But let's see how this Yu-sari notebook paper reacts to the ink. Oh yeah, closest to the Rhodia paper reaction. The ink is kind of swimming on the top here. Yeah, I think this has acted the closest to the Rhodia paper, like I said. It's still, the ink is still kind of wet. The paper has warped a little, almost like the Rhodia paper, but no bleed through. I'm excited to compare it once it's dry. So I'm gonna let these little cards dry, and then we'll come back to look at ghosting and shading on the back. Let's take a look at these inks now that the paper is dry. So, Rhodia. The Rhodia paper definitely, you know, curved a little under the liquid of the ink, but there is a little bit of ghosting happening here. Interesting that it's like ghosting through, well, sorry, there's some ghosting, but then there's a little bit of bleed through, and interesting how it's following the grid line. So can't go too heavy with the ink on the Rhodia paper. The Moleskine, complete bleed through. And even when it's not bleeding through, definite ghosting. But anywhere the ink is getting an iota of heaviness, bleeding through. So this paper, this set of Moleskine paper, not doing too well. Iroful has dried. Interesting that Iroful is showing a little bit of sheen that this ink actually does kind of give off. It's like a reddish sheen. I don't know if it's capturing it in this light, but it's happening, you know, right here. The Iroful paper, no bleed through, minimal ghosting. The only place where it starts to happen is right here. So, and I can just see that the ink was very, very thick. Like when I put that line down, it was almost globbing out. So I think on this Iroful paper, if you're using a pen that is not too loose with the ink, you're going to be completely fine. So far the Iroful is our best performing paper. Let's look at our Tomoe River Sanzen paper. You can definitely see some slight feathering here, where the ink gets a little thicker, but definite ghosting and definite bleed through on this batch. So these A5 notebooks, the companions for the cousin, this paper that was in it, not super fountain pen friendly. Yeah, just kind of went straight through. We've got our Amica CD15. The writing, a tiny bit of feathering there. Looking through, almost no ghosting and only like one little bit of ghosting slash slight bleed through right here. But this is where the ink was pooling the most. So just got to be careful with that heavy ink flow. I think this is on par with the Shikiori paper in terms of performance. I'm sorry, the Iroful paper. Shikiori is the ink in terms of performance. So the two top right now are Iroful and the Amica. And then if we look at this Yu-sari paper, turn it over, absolutely nothing. They were right at goods for the study. No ghosting, no bleed through, really solid. I mean, it makes sense at 95 GSM, but it is really holding its weight well. So yeah, I would say if you're looking for something that's super fountain pen friendly, this Yu-sari notebook really is taking the cake. However, the Rhodia and the Iroful, followed closely by the Amica CD15. And then in third place tied here, we have the Rhodia and the Iroful paper. I mean, really the Iroful, the Rhodia, if it gets too heavy, is bleeding through. So yeah, I actually think I take it back. The Rhodia like takes the ink really well, but that bleed through. So yeah, top place we've got the Yu-sari, followed by the Iroful, and actually third place Iroful, the Amica CD15, and then we've got the Rhodia, Tomoe River Sanzen, and the Moleskine here near the bottom. We do have the MD paper, which I do think is probably going to end up being somewhere along the lines in the top tier. And so to do that, we're going to do my official swatch for my notebook. But thank you for joining me for this test of the different papers. I get to put this into my stationery journal and refer back to it. I hope this was helpful as well. And I'm excited to have my blue birthday ink. Ba-ba-ba-bum. It is not a big birthday, but I am approaching one. So one more year till I hit another milestone. Yeah, let's just pop into my ink journal. let this dry and we can look at it, and then that'll kind of compare it to the other swatches and we can wrap it up. All right, by the powers of movie magic, we are here at the mostly dry ink swatch. I'm gonna pull it up to the camera. You can see the ink. There's just a little spot that's kind of wet there. See the writing. Yeah, and if I turn, just being a little careful with that one wet spot, it over, pretty great. Just two little moments where it kind of bled through, and I think I might have been pushing really hard with the muddler in those two spots, but good to note that there is a tiny little bit of bleed through there. So it seems like our Yu-sari paper really worked the best with no bleed through, no ghosting. You could tell it was like about to get there, maybe in this spot right here, but that puts the MD paper pretty much on par with this Amica CD15 notebook. With its one tiny dot of bleed through, very similar to how this MD paper is performing. I'd say it's similar-ish to the Iroful. This Iroful paper only bled through where the ink got really, really saturated. And honestly, I feel like if I hadn't had loaded up that stub nib with too much ink, it probably would be on par with this Amica and with this MD paper. But as is, it's in third place behind the Amica CD15 and the MD paper tied for second, with our Yu-sari still being the shining star of the day. I am so excited to have a new ink, to have a proper blue ink. I'm already wondering which pen I'm going to ink this up with. I know I'm going to want to be using this a lot. And the other Shikiori ink I have, I use all the time. It's the ink I use in my reading journal. And I really love the way that it performs in that notebook with my extra fine nib. So I'm excited to, I'm trying to find the other one I have. Here we go. This Nyoi Sumide. I'm excited to see it, this ink, the Yonaga, in one of my notebooks. Thank you so much for joining me on this special birthday edition of Michael and the Margins. I'm so glad that you took the time to sit with me and do some inky business. Until next time, I hope that you have a lovely rest of the day, whether you're watching this in the morning, midday, or at night, and that you keep exploring the possibilities of a blank piece of paper, much like the blank pieces of paper we explored today. Okay, I'll see you then. Bye.